Welcome back to Spy Cannot Draw, where I struggle to remember how to do the most basic things of drawing, like anatomy, proportion, weight, and etc., while I ramble about something over it. And today that thing is the Clone Wars Season 7, which I am finally getting caught back up on. As a reminder, I am doing one larger art piece for this whole series, with each part showing just a part of the speed paint, so it won't be a finished product by the end of this video, but it will be done by the season finale review. I will go episode by episode giving my thoughts on each one up to the most recent episode 6, though I realize that some of these have been out for a while at this point, so I will put the timestamps up for when the review for each individual episode starts in case you don't want to sit through all of them or only want to see the one for the most recent episode. Just watch however you'd like and let's get started. And everything here will include spoilers because it is just way too hard to talk about these for any substantial amount of time without any spoilers. So episode 2 is the continuation of the first episode, obviously. This arc carries on to the 4th episode of the season, and already there is an improvement from some of my critiques in the first episode. The voice acting from Baker has less awkward moments. It's still not perfect, but it is still felt a lot more natural. Particularly with Rex, the more unnatural stuff comes more from the Bad Batch, especially Wrecker, though to be fair, I think the vast majority of that is actually the dialogue. I mentioned that I found Wrecker annoying in the last video, and very little about that has changed. He has some pretty bad one-liners and quips that come across very unnaturally and kiddie compared to everything else that we see. Wrecker does talk minimally, and that's a bit of a mercy, but they just leaned way too hard into that trope of the big dumb muscle character with him. Outside of Wrecker, we get some fun banter with the characters, and it starts to feel more like the old show. The action starts a lot quicker, and the whole thing is very fast-paced and engaging. We also start to get some little sprinkles relating more to the larger era of Star Wars, like Obi-Wan knowing that Anakin was talking to Padme. And speaking of, you can see that Padme has the start of a baby bump in this episode, which I think is pretty cool. I like seeing Anakin and Padme's relationship in this show particularly, and absolutely nowhere else. And this is the only place that I can tolerate Padme as a character at all. I have a huge issue with Padme, and it's technically less her and more the way the writers portray her in the movies and even into the books, but she's an incredibly weak character. Because despite being an incredibly well-respected politician and leader, the writers decided that Padme was absolutely nothing without Anakin. Like in the book, she talks about how she was nothing before him, and she only exists to be Anakin Skywalker's wife. Yeah, no. And she mourned the loss of her man so much that she died. I could rant for a very long time about how much I do not like Padme because of all of this, but I will spare you that in this review. I just got reminded since she does show up briefly in this episode. But Clone Wars Padme, I like her, and she had a few nice lines here, and she is okay in my book. But anyways, we get another tactical style Clone Wars mission out of it. I like the bit of drama we see between the clones and how Anakin has to step in and sort it out while seeing how it's his influence on Rex that at least in part led to this. The character stuff is always my favorite stuff in the show. It's why I prefer seeing the long-term characters like Rex, Ahsoka, and Anakin and Obi-Wan over the newer ones, especially when we occasionally get very one-dimensional tropes like Wrecker, but overall they're fine. I like how racism amongst clones is canon now, and comments about how some types of clones are better than others. That sounds really funny and I jest at it, but it worked fine. It felt a little forced at time, and Hunter really just wanted to be a dick for not great reasons sometimes, but not much of a complaint from me. They meet a group of natives called the Poltex, and I like the visual designs on them, and they have like a cool kind of electronic-y synth voice that they talk in. I think that stuff was cool. And from there, it's another kind of like take the tower type thing that we saw in the first episode, just with higher stakes and more action. And that ending with Echo flopping out was decently creepy, very Matrix-esque. Definitely an improvement over episode 1, and personally, I thought this was also better than episode 3 as well. Not massively, but still, on to talking about that one. So most things from episode 2 have been carried over, and it's very similar in most respects. It's just a continuation, but I have more issues here. There are two kind of big Deus Ex Machinas, or just extremely convenient things happening with either poor or lazy explanations that stuck out to me. The first was Echo pointing out the vent at the top of the room without anyone else noticing it. Now for this one, I know that it was for the writers to establish Echo saying that he's gained access to the Separatist systems, and he knows the layouts of their buildings and ships and whatnot, which then sets up the whole Echo may be a traitor thing. But given how obvious that hatch is at the top of the ceiling with all of the supports leading the eye there, it's hard to see how nobody would have noticed this until Echo pointed it out. I think it would have been better for someone to see it, be like, hey, that looks like a hatch. Could that lead out? For Echo to then say it's a ventilation shaft that leads outside, and explaining how he knows that via the tech they hooked him into. That would seem a lot more realistic to me, but the second one was worse, and it was when they got pinched on the high rise, and Tech could call the Kirdax because he has a recording of their stress call, because he has a hobby of recording things.
I do have a brilliant idea. I'm hanging here. When the locals attacked us, I recorded the creature's distress call. It records everything. It's a hobby.
That wasn't previously established in any way, shape, or form. It was just a sudden way to get out of the situation. What they really needed was an excuse for the crew to get back to the village that they previously promised they wouldn't bring the war to, because the Kirdax that they fly on, they can't really steer or control them, so the creatures just flew back to the village that they presumably lived or knew. And then it led to them rallying the natives to their side. My main issue with this is that it seems to kind of conflict with other themes and ideas the show has tried to go for before. There have been other arcs and episodes talking about neutrality and how neutrality for some is the best route, and how the Republic is not the altruistic entity that those who fight for it might wish that it were, but instead they seem to kind of guilt trip these people into fighting for them by showing them some of the bad things that their enemy did. This would make more sense if we knew that the Republic was the good guys, or if at the very least the characters that we see thought that the Republic was all good, but when it's already been established that at least two of these characters take issue with the Republic in some way or understand the nuance of war better, it all comes off as the clones and Anakin needed more bodies to fight the drones because otherwise they would be screwed, so they coaxed some locals into helping them. This episode works in being action-packed and fast-paced and the character banter and whatnot, but the plot here is the biggest issue. It's got some really troublesome conveniences and seems to go contrary to other things that we have seen built up to in the show. And my final note will be that the final shot of this episode, we see Echo looking somewhat conflicted while this really sinister music plays, and what this was meant to go for was to sort of foreshadow that there would be suspicion on the part of others over whether or not he's still loyal to the Republic. But what they should have done was show one of the Bad Batch, probably Hunter, looking at Echo suspiciously while that type of music plays, because as is, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. Since Echo never did betray the Republic, it was very intentionally misleading. It's like, oh, we see Echo conflicted while sinister music plays. He's got something going on. When in reality, he didn't. It was purely the other characters where the issue lied. They shouldn't have done any of that. This episode is the last one of the Bad Batch arc, and first thing, they cut the joke with the Padme pinup, and god damn it, I really wanted that joke to be in here. But anyways, this episode immediately reminded me how much I hate Mace Windu's design in this show. I know Windu has been in the previous episodes, but he was just big and front and center at the very beginning here, and we get more shots lingering on Echo here with that kind of sinister, mysterious music, but here at least it makes more sense because they have established the suspicion of the other characters at this point, so it works here. I don't have much to say about the plot, it all works fine. Is that whole Echo gave the whole code except for the last number because he got stopped before he could thing incredibly cliche? Yeah. That's a minor complaint on my end. I will say that I really liked Anakin's confrontation with Trench, and we get to see just how willing Anakin is to bend the Jedi's ways of morality in a much better way than we ever see in the films. It was a nice moment. Also, Rip Trench, you made a good secondary villain and will be missed. And all of this because the Techno Union just wouldn't tell Trench about the loss of Echo. I also wonder how many military reports or briefings that Anakin has lied on about exactly what it is he did in situations scene like where he interrogated Trench. Just in general, how many war crimes or atrocities against the Jedi Code has Anakin committed in this show? The number has to be very high. Speaking of high numbers, I find it funny that Windu specifically mentioned he had killed over 100,000 droids, because that suggests that Jedi have confirmed kill counts. I wouldn't think Jedi would have those, but now I want a chart of confirmed droid kills by the various Jedi generals. And a final note for this episode is that some of the best moments in the show are in the very quiet moments where we just see a character's emotional reaction to a situation, such as Rex realizing that he got Echo back and now he might leave again to be with the Bad Batch, even if not permanently. Just so many good quiet moments that do not have to say anything. Ahsoka is back! Yes, instant 10 out of 10 for the episode. The second arc of the series focuses on Ahsoka and what she's doing after leaving the Jedi. The first thing I want to talk about is how this episode is so freaking gorgeous. The lighting is so pretty in this episode, especially during that scene where Ahsoka and Trace are working on the demo droids in the back. But seriously, this is the best looking episode of the season and maybe one of the whole show. And I like how it doesn't take long after we see Ahsoka for her to just casually kick the absolute ass of two goons that culminates in a nut shot. Dave Filoni is a man who knows exactly what the fans want and he's willing to deliver it, and by God, I love him for it. Really, this whole episode has been my favorite so far. Am I biased because Ahsoka is here? Probably. But still, we haven't gotten to any of the episodes that are going to be the real meat of the season, which will be the Siege of Mandalore. So we're exploring some different ideas like the Underworld of Coruscant. I liked the new sister characters in this episode, though Trace in the next episode becomes a tad annoying, and I know that that's them trying to show her naivety. She'll probably get a mini arc about it, but I did like the dynamic between her and her hustler older sister. I also thought for a second that Trace was so willing to help Ahsoka because she had a crush on her. Would I be opposed to that if that's where it ended up going? No, I would not. The voice acting from the two of them is really fantastic, as well as from Ashley Eccleston as Ahsoka. Once again, the show shows that sometimes the quiet moments are the most powerful, like when Ahsoka is standing on the mechanic platform looking back up towards the surface of the planet. We also see love cats in this episode, which are something that got introduced in Rebels and are from the main characters of that show's home planet of Lothal. But now I guess love cats are the whole Star Wars universe equivalent of cats, which is a nice little detail and tie-in. Also, the couple of references Ahsoka made to Anakin made my heart happy, especially when she referred to him as her older brother. Oh, in that moment where the little kid saw Ahsoka use the Force while everyone else was paying attention to the falling droid catcher, I loved it. I really liked this episode. I am so happy to see Ahsoka back, and yes, all of this, please. And now finally onto episode 6, the most recent episode. It carries over the same arc as before, only now they have to leave the planet to go pick up a spice shipment from Kessel and deliver it somewhere that ends up being to a crime boss. But before that, we get to see quite a few telling things about the older sister's character, Rafa. And even though I think she's a bit of a bitch, I find her a very compelling character with a lot of conflicting motivations, who at her core really does care for her sister. Trace was already a bit of that younger, bubblier type, but now we see that she's also very naive and not the most socially aware of people. Characters like that always tend to be a tad on the annoying side at first, but it's not something that I put too much weight on. Kessel was really cool to see, a bit more of a tie-in to the rest of the universe, but again, my favorite moment was when the ship flew past the military cruiser and Anakin and Ahsoka sensed each other. Yes, it was convenient that they flew right past that ship where Anakin was, but I don't really care about that. The moment was more important than that. This episode and the last one have also been like genuinely funny. We got some humor in the earlier ones too, but some of the jokes in particular I really liked in these last two episodes. This episode was also very pretty as well, not quite as much as the last one where we spent more time in the underworld, but still the Kessel landscape was very well done and very nice to look at. And it ended with a bit of a cliffhanger with the three of them being caught in a tractor beam of the Pike Syndicate. Now are either going to be captured or have some crazy plan to get out of it. It was also very cool to see Ahsoka used the Jedi mind trick again. We still haven't seen Ahsoka with her sabers, she doesn't have them, though when you click on the show on Disney Plus, we see her in the outfit that she's wearing and the sisters that are in this arc, and she is holding a blue saber. So wonder how that'll come into play, if at all. That could purely be a marketing thing. So there we are, finally caught up. Overall, I have been very happy with the show, with a couple of episodes not really doing it as much for me. But given that these episodes are going to ultimately not be quite as impactful or relevant as the Mandalore episodes, with as good as they've been, I am really looking forward to when we get to that part of the season. This makes Star Wars feel more like Star Wars to me, and I enjoy that a lot. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video and my thoughts on all of the new episodes. Be sure to let me know what you think of the show, and if you enjoy what I do here, you can consider liking the video and maybe subscribing, but if not, that is still totally fine, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. Bye.